What does the United Kingdom, Harry Potter, Shirley Caesar, and bad acting have in common? Why? Hey everyone, this is D, Movieman, fellow cinephile, popcorn addict, and emerging film critic, coming to you with reliable recaps, reviews, and reactions. And once again, I'm coming to you all with another episode, or episodes, of The Traitors, Season 3, Episode 8, A Bee is Lying, 9, The Silent Assassin, and 10, The Seer. Whew, let me just say that traveling is something I have a love-hate relationship with. I love being there. I love having the experience when I'm there. But the going, the coming, the airport, the luggage, the wind down afterwards, like the jet lag, woo! I've been struggling, for lack of a better phrase. Now, I did have the opportunity to fly out to the UK to hang out with one of my best pals, Mike Z, aka Did You Z That, at his wedding to Emma, along with a multitude of YouTubers and friends that I'm really tight with. Man, it was just all of us being in the same space, much less it being a wedding of a friend that we're all tight with. That was really, really something. So I definitely appreciated that experience, but everything else, as far as the traveling piece, your boy is tired. Okay? And I've still been trying to get back into the flow of things, which is why these recaps have been on the back burner. I'm just like, I need to get my mind and my body right. I think I'm getting there, but this is why I'm having to recap multiple episodes. So for obvious reasons, most of you have seen 8 and 9, so I'll just kind of breeze through and kind of give more so my general thoughts on those. So despite the dramatics of Tom's face, I already knew it wasn't him. I could definitely tell it was something done for dramatic effect, but in the end, Chriselle is taken out. Chriselle kind of sucked, and that's without any biases. She really didn't do anything to benefit the faithful. She was, in too close with Boston Rob, who was a traitor, and then her friend, as a part of her trio, the Bambies, she ended up getting one of her best friends out the game. So it was just like, yeah, Chriselle, it was your time. I'm sorry. As far as the challenge, I kind of thought it was a little convoluted. I understand that the challenges are supposed to be difficult. I mean, they're supposed to be challenging, hence them being called challenges. The whole backwards sound, and then you call it into the phone, and then they repeat that, and then they record it, and they play it back so it plays forward. I was just like, all right, So in the end, they do what needs to be done, and they bank even more money for the pot. Lastly, I will say that Brittany commenting on the challenge taking a back seat to the musical passions of Tom Sandoval had me hollering, because all that warbling, I'm just like, is this musical talent? Is this what passes for musical talent? Again, let's just move on. Sierra manages to lock down a shield, which is hidden inside a stuffed teddy bear. However, that basically comes to naught, because you can't be eliminated if you're already banished, and that's exactly what happens to Sierra. After the Roundtable, we basically end this episode with Danielle trying to convince Carolyn to recruit Brittany, which I did mention in a previous recap. And although it would be cool in theory, knowing that this is going to likely impact Carolyn negatively, which Carolyn is also aware of, yeah, it's not looking too good. So, of course, this leads us directly into episode 9, A Silent Assassin, and Danielle's doing all this whining and begging and, letting Carolyn know that, oh my gosh, we can get to the end together, we can split the money, and I'm just like, okay. I mean, she has to convince her, but it's just, I don't know. It's just something pitiful about the way Danielle communicates. And I guess also knowing that she's continually backstabbed Carolyn, which I suppose you can also do from a strategic standpoint, but it has never made sense to me at all. So in the end, they decide to get Sam out. Poor Sam. I mean, I feel like his not even just his screen time. Well, I feel like to a certain extent his screen time was limited, but definitely what we heard from him was limited because he did not really have much to say. He was kind of coming around, but I kind of feel like, no disrespect, but I kind of feel like Sam was just around for eye candy because with that B-roll footage of them going to bed in the castle, we were always seeing pecs, shoulders, nips, and they did the same thing with Dylan. I'm just like, okay. The producers are not slick. Let me also add that for Ivar to be as irrelevant in this game as he is, the fact that he manages to be such a snake is wild to me. It's just like, how do you run back and forth telling another person what the other person said when you don't even know who the actual traitor is? It's like at some point, you have to hold on to something. And the fact that he ran to Boston Rob and told him what was going on, and now running to Danielle and telling him what Carolyn is saying, I'm just like, okay, Ivar, I tried to be nice when Brittany mentioned the whole furniture thing, but you are furniture, and you're furniture that is now impacting the game in a very obnoxious way. As far as the challenge, we see everyone playing human chess on a giant chessboard, which, considering the Traitors piece and some of the other pieces on the board that they showed, it was definitely giving me Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. And you already know what scene I'm talking about. That scene has always creeped me out just from the design of the pieces themselves and then what they do once they take down another piece. Yeah, so I immediately thought of that. We see Kate, we see Poverty. Obviously, they're just here for kicks and giggles. They're Traitors alumni at this point, and they're just providing commentary, which was cool, but I noticed they also did mention at one point that Dylan was giving Peter vibes. I said, listen. Listen, it feels good to hear it. I'm telling you, that was the vibe I was getting, so I'm glad to know I was not the only one. As far as the leader of the pack, that is Tom, but everyone is guessing Dylan, and then when Carolyn, for reasons I am unclear on, I understand you want to bank money, but still, it's just like, how important is the money if you're not going to be here because you get exposed? Which is exactly what she does. She's just like, oh no, what about Tom? What about Tom? And then, of course, ends up being Tom. And they're just like, Especially Dylan. He's kind of like, And Dolores is basically telling her, man, you really pushed for that answer. Like, wow, you really went for it. And she's like, oh, I didn't say that. I was like, what is this? And then she all but seals her fate when the question is asked who is the most irrelevant, and she says herself. Like, she's pointing the attention. That is the answer, but she's calling that out herself. And I'm just like, Carolyn, why? Why? So, there's no use delaying the inevitable. Actually, it's a little bit better, the fact that I can kind of breeze through it and not go play by play. But when it comes to the Roundtable and the whole tete-a-tete between Carolyn and Danielle, I don't think either argument was overly compelling. I feel like there were too many examples they could have used, especially Carolyn. I did hear that some things were cut out as far as what Carolyn said. I don't know why they would do that. I guess for the sake of time. But either way, Carolyn's argument versus Danielle comes out the victor. And I have to admit, this entire episode, Danielle did actually play well. But again, knowing that her goal has always been to get Carolyn out before Carolyn was ever a threat, and knowing she was willing to work with her, it's ridiculous. So here I am, having to deal with seeing my girl go. The church is in mourning. She gets out, she ends up by saying, look, she's very emotional, and, you could tell, like, the emotions and the experience, the weight of everything has really gotten to her. And she ends it by saying, look, being a traitor is not easy. So she's out, and I'm willing to accept that. I don't like it, but I'm willing to accept that. However, I can't even do that, because no sooner does Carolyn make this announcement, all we see is Danielle.
lost your damn mind. When you get your damn mind, you call me.
You know, I'm pretty even-keeled, easygoing, all of that. You know, I don't get too rah-rah about shows. I mean, I still get invested. And I'll have my moments where I'll kind of, you know, talk back to the screen, whatever. It has been a long time. It has been a really long time since I genuinely wanted to throw something at my television.
Shut the fuck up in 2020.
Yo, you sound dumb. You sound stupid.
I was like, are you okay? I had so much secondhand embarrassment. What's all the shenanigans and the theatrics and the histrionics? And do you really think that you don't think that's going to seem weird to anybody? This is not real life. So now Danielle is the lone traitor, the remaining traitor. And I believe that is in spite of her gameplay, not because of it. I understand she did what needed to be done in this roundtable, but just the way this happened to begin with, like, why? So obviously, since recruitment is again on the table for the last time, Danielle's like, look, Brittany is my ride or die. She's going to be the next traitor, and we're going to take the faithful down one by one together, which then leads us into episode 10, The Seer. So obviously, Danielle reveals herself to Brittany. I don't think Brittany was that surprised, honestly. It seemed like she was already kind of like, you know, picking up on it anyway, but naturally, she agrees. I don't think she would choose to be eliminated. So, yes, they are now a duo. They are deciding who should be eliminated. And it comes down to Ivar, Gabby, or Tom. As Danielle and Brittany are confirming their decision, we hear Danielle in the confessional saying, like, we're strategizing, we're conversing. That's what you do. You know, traitors don't go against other traitors. Traitors are together.
Are you kidding me?
Again, this can't be real life. Danielle cannot lack this much self-awareness. She can't be this delusional. She can't ignore the staggering irony of that statement. Woo, Danielle is a case study. That's all I'm going to say at this point. It just literally, my brain like rattles trying to make sense of her decisions and her logic. Whew. So we find out that Sandoval is the one eliminated at breakfast the next morning. And I will say, for all his weird, uncomfortable energy for maybe the earlier bits of the show, I will say after a certain moment, Tom kind of grew on me, you know. He's never beaten the allegations, and he's never getting away from that Sandoval thing. Although, again, like I said, it doesn't personally affect me. And I do think there's something to be said about people you don't like on other shows, just the other reality shows that these people come from. How you may not like them in one setting, but then in the Traitors, because it's so kind of like lighthearted, we're having fun, we're also competing. I just think allows you to kind of see the person in a different light. And I think that's something that Tom needed. Now, all this stuff he's saying about, you know, how good he was at the game, you know, what a big threat he was, I was just like, again, delusions, you know, the delusions continue. But I will say this, my expectations were subverted because when Tom came into this game, we had one person I'm not really a fan of who is deluded. And then as far as the game, I actually ended up being somewhat entertained by them. Whereas Danielle, although I didn't watch Big Brother, you know, I know of Danielle as far as her legacy on that show. So I was like, okay, I'm because, you know, I'm rooting for everybody black, and it's not changing. Happy Black History Month, by the way.
We need a longer month.
Black History Month? We need the whole year.
We need a longer month.
Black History Year. How about Black History Year for 1 year?
Yeah.
But, you know, her delusions ended up giving me the opposite effect. I was like, I don't know who's more delusional, but at least Tom's delusion has been more enjoyable to watch. Danielle's literally just had me questioning reality. We see Dolores and Danielle having a conversation about potentially getting Gabby out, and Dolores is going on and on about how loyal and honest that Danielle is. Why is Dolores here? And what has she contributed to this game? Can anyone answer that? Anybody? Anybody? We also see Dylan and Ivar's conversation where Ivar mentions that he has had his eye on Danielle for a while. And I was just like, but if that was the case, why were you running to Danielle telling her what other people are saying about her? Okay, Ivar, sure. So then Dylan mentions that he's once again leaning towards Gabby, and I'm like, so wait a minute. So despite the fact that you just had a conversation with Gabby, I believe in the last episode, or even the episode before that, and although you came to the conclusion that Gabby would have likely taken him out episodes ago, considering that he's voted for her multiple times, now you're throwing that theory out the window and now saying, yeah, let's go for Gabby again? I don't understand. I understand, like, there's a lot that can go on, and maybe what you're thinking about one thing suddenly gets brushed aside because something else happens or someone says something. But it's just like, if I think something, it's not going to go away. So if I've established, okay, logically, it doesn't make sense that Gabby is a traitor, and I get it. You doubt yourself, you go back and forth. But I was just like, you can't walk back theories that you established, especially when they make sense. These faithful, I tell you. So Gabby comes through, of course, and she's figured out that, obviously, that last Roundtable showdown was a traitor on traitor situation. And she also knows that one of the remaining traitors, which are likely two, one of those is Danielle. For obvious reasons, Brittany is worried about this, and she's like, let me start floating Gabby's name. Let me do what I gotta do. And then we see this moment where Danielle comes in and just sits next to Gabby, and Gabby's just like, okay. Like, I mean, this is awkward, intense, and weird, but I'm not leaving. Then we see Danielle once again in her confessional, directing this to Gabby, but saying like, I am so sorry, sweetie, for what I'm about to do to you, because I'm about to end you. You're about to be annihilated. I could say a whole lot of things in response to that. But all I will say is, life comes at you fast. So as far as the challenge, this whole setup I was already familiar with because, as I may have said before, I don't know if I have, but I've watched the Traitors UK, and I'm probably going to give some commentary on that. But this is the same setup, like from top to bottom. So when it comes down to it, there are these 3 mini challenges that all the contestants will be participating in, and they will have the opportunity to bank money. And at the end of all 3 challenges, or mini challenges, whoever has the most money will be able to unlock the gift of the Seer. And what the Seer can do is basically invite one of the contestants to have a one-on-one conversation, and then they have to reveal whether they're a traitor or a faithful. So for obvious reasons, this is something that is going to absolutely change the game. The first is a memory challenge where they have to pop the right balloons that correspond to gold versus skulls. And, that ends up being a mess. Gabby and Dylan end up getting out. Everyone else ends up banking money. And then moving on to the next mini challenge, we have the return of the creepy dolls. You pull the string, it'll state the amount of money you have, and you can basically keep pulling to a certain amount. But as soon as it says you're greedy, then boom, you're out. Not just out of money, but out of the game. So it was interesting seeing that. I was really annoyed with Dylan and Gabby because I kind of feel like once you get to a certain point, you just stop. Like, to me, if I had 1,600, I'd be like, okay, I'm done. Or I think it might have been Dylan who got to 18. I was like, are you serious? Stop. And they didn't. And so all 3 of them, like I said, lost. Danielle ends up getting the one doll that goes all the way up to 2,000. Okay. Is that a coincidence? Maybe. And then in the last mini challenge, there are these bags with gold coins, also tucked inside some form of feces. I don't know if it's real or just like they put some kind of smell in it to make it seem like that, some kind of concoction. But either way, it's nasty and it's stinking. So it's not fun, but they have to retrieve those coins, put them in these cages, and then at the end, before time runs out, they have to lift the cage off the ground. If anyone misses it, they're not able to hoist their cage up, then they lose and they're out. However, in the end, everyone's able to bank money, everyone is able to hoist the cages. But in the end, we're not going to find out who has the gift or the power of the Seer until after the Roundtable. So jumping forward to the round table, Brittany opens up with what I personally think is one of the worst opening statements for a round table like ever. She brings up the fact that Gabby mainly stuck to her group while everyone else was getting to know each other. And she thought it might indicate that maybe she wasn't as fearful. I don't know if she meant to say in fear or just fearful, but she says wasn't as fearful of her position, if that makes sense. And me and my mom just looked at each other like, no, that doesn't make sense. But Gabby. I'm not just saying this because of this next moment, but honestly, genuinely, I didn't really know what to make of Gabby at first because obviously I don't watch The Bachelor, but I thought she was kind of quirky, kind of funny, but you know, I didn't really have any real take on her for the most part, not a real opinion. Once she was there and was floating around after that bookcase opening with Danielle and Carolyn talking and how she just kind of kept that close to the vest, I was like, let's see. Now, honestly, I think Gabby's game would have been better served away from the Bambis because I kind of feel like her instincts end up kind of getting overridden by their thoughts, Nikki and Chriselle. So I think when it comes down to it, she has really emerged as someone I've enjoyed. And like I said, she's funny. She's, there's just something enjoyable about her on the show. But I will say there's never been a real need for Gabby to really speak up and say a whole lot at the round table. Until now. Gabby brings up the similarities of the traitor on traitor dynamic, which Ivar also co-signs. Danielle then throws out that Gabby would make the perfect traitor because she is the quintessential girl next door. And it wouldn't make sense for me to eliminate those people because that wouldn't benefit me. And Gabby's like, well, what about Tom? Didn't he just float your name? And she says, oh, well, I didn't know about that. And, I voted for Boston Rob not once but twice. Gabby said, so did I. And you can see in Danielle's face, she's like, It looked like she wasn't expecting that. Danielle is also mentioning that Gabby is super smart. And Gabby's like, well, I'm not dumb. But clearly I've been kept around for this particular moment. And she says, look, if I am banished, it's just going to be another example of a strong woman with a personality being falsely accused and kicked out of the game. And then, of course, Danielle's like, I don't have the stomach to be a traitor. I'm a faithful, and everything she's saying, Gabby's like, same. Gabby ain't letting up. So, of course, Dolores, what would it be? What would a round table be without Dolores being loud and wrong? And she's going on and on about Ivar. She's reaching all the way back, talking about Bob the drag queen, and then Dorinda. I'm like, Dorinda was literally out the first night. Like, so now you've circled back around to... Moving on to the vote, because I can't with Dolores. But Dolores, Brittany, and Danielle vote for Ivar. Which is interesting because Danielle doesn't go for Gabby. She's like, I'm not gonna go after you. I just suddenly had an aha moment. You did all that, and all of a sudden you've suddenly been convinced. All right, I hope these folks are paying attention. So then Ivar, Gabby, and Dylan. Wow, finally. Dylan actually does vote for Danielle with the other two. So now that everything is tied, the two contestants have to make a final plea, and then they'll vote again, and then if it's a tie again, then it's just going to be a game of chance. Ivar basically says, look, I don't do drama. I can tell. I don't do drama. I have no reason to lie. I don't lie. And if you take me out, it's just going to be that much harder for the faithful to get the remaining traitors out. Of course, Danielle is whining and doing her tears and bad acting, and yeah. Moving on, we get, we get the revote. Now that it's down to these two, Danielle and Ivar cannot vote anymore. So it's up to everyone else at the table. And Dylan keeps his vote. And I was like, all right, hallelujah. Thank you, Dylan. Gabby votes again as well. Dolores, of course, still votes for Ivar. And Brittany's face, when Dolores did that, she looked shocked. So we now have Brittany as the final vote. And as soon as she begins to turn over her mini chalkboard to reveal the name, cut to black. Peacock you will pay for your crimes. And that closes out my thoughts on episodes 8, 9, and 10. I guess that means I'm all caught up now, thankfully. Whew. Like I said, I think this cliffhanger is BS, but, you know, it's the last episode, and of course they want to get as many viewers as they can, so I don't like it, but I do understand at the same time. But honestly, I'm pretty sure Danielle is the name on Brittany's little board. My mom thought there's a tiny possibility that it might end up being a tie, but we both basically thought it was Danielle. Going off of her face, unless they did that out of sequence and they just edited that in, then I think Danielle might be out. And honestly, it's long overdue. So we'll see what happens. And yeah, this has been a very questionable season of the Traitors. So I can only imagine how things are going to turn out in next week's finale. So, once again, this is D, Movieman, signing off, and I'll see you at the movies.